Ethiopian Educational Information and Communication Technology presents Educational Satellite Television Programs.
Hello, teacher. Hello, students. Welcome to today's lesson on scientific methods. So far, in our unit on the science of biology, we have been discussing the meaning of science. We have concluded that it is an ongoing effort to find new information and principles which can increase human knowledge and understanding. We have talked about research and investigations into natural occurrences and ideas. Today, we will be learning about scientific methods. We will demonstrate how scientific methods are used to make significant observations and discoveries. As well, we will learn how these methods are used to solve problems and prove ideas. This is going to be a very interesting lesson. Let us get started. Scientific method is the process by which scientists approach their work. They do so in a logical and sensible manner. Scientific method is a way of observing and explaining events while trying to establish if the explanations are true or false. For years, people explained what they saw without testing their ideas to determine if they were correct. For instance, people used to believe in spontaneous generation. This idea suggests that non-living objects could give rise to living objects. As an example, before refrigeration existed, butchers would hang animal carcasses from the ceiling in their shops. Because the meat was not refrigerated, the shop was always full of flies. People believed that over time, the meat would spontaneously turn into flies. Now that rationale and scientific methods are used to explain occurrences like this, we know that meat does not spontaneously turn into flies. Why do you think it is important to determine whether something is true or false using scientific methods? Write your ideas on a piece of paper.
Students, let's get ready. Begin. Time's up! Let's get back to our lesson.
Welcome back, students. I am sure everyone had some interesting ideas. It is important to use scientific methods to determine whether something is true or false because it makes the explanation valid and accurate. If people explained natural occurrences and ideas without using scientific methods that supply evidence for their statements, a lot of misleading and unreliable information would be spread. It is challenging to explain or further understand something if assumptions are made. By using scientific method, the true information is revealed and it becomes possible to fully understand an idea or occurrence. A number of stages are involved in the scientific method. Direct your attention to the diagram on the screen. This shows us the scientific method. Let us go through each step and discuss it in greater detail. The first step is to ask a question. When biologists see something happen and they do not understand why or how it happens, naturally, they want to find out more. The next step would be research. Biologists try to find as much information as possible about their question. Perhaps someone else has already looked into this question and has discovered an answer. It would be important to know information like this before continuing on with the scientific method. Next, a hypothesis is constructed. A hypothesis is an educated guess a biologist thinks the explanation of an observation will be. A hypothesis has to be stated in such a way that it can be tested in an experiment. Based on a hypothesis, a prediction is made. A prediction is an educated guess as to how the biologist thinks the experiment will turn out. The following step is to design and carry out an experiment to test the hypothesis. Then, the results of the experiment are analyzed and conclusions are drawn based on the data attained. The next step is to accept or reject the hypothesis. During this step, the biologist refers back to the original hypothesis to determine whether or not it matches the information attained by the experiment. The final step is to report the results. In this step, the biologist can decide whether or not to share the results with other biologists. Someone else might decide to take the work further or investigate another aspect of the same experiment, while others may want to disprove the results. This is the final step of the scientific method. Let us refer back to the example of rotting meat that we talked about earlier in this lesson. By using the same scientific method we just learned, biologist Francesco Redi disproved the idea that rotting meat spontaneously turned into flies. The experiment Redi conducted was considered the first true experiment. In 1668, Redi carried out an experiment using jars that contained meat. Some jars were left open and exposed to air, while others were sealed. Redi hypothesized that only flies could produce more flies. He predicted that flies would be found in the open jars and not in the closed jars. His results matched his predictions, and when he shared his results, other biologists obtained similar results from their own tests. Redi was able to conclude that flies cannot be produced from rotting meat. He also went on to say that it was improbable that any form of spontaneous generation could occur. Students, we have time for one more activity. Let us review some of the terms we learned today. Please write the definitions for the following terms.
Students, let's get ready. Begin. Time's up. Let's get back to our lesson.
Hello again, everyone. I am sure this was a simple activity for you. Let us review the answers together. Scientific method is defined as the process by which scientists approach their work. Hypothesis is defined as an educated guess about how an observation can be explained. It must be stated in a way that it can be tested by an experiment. Prediction is an educated guess as to how the biologist thinks the experiment will turn out. Spontaneous generation is defined as the belief that living things can appear from non-living objects. Were you able to define every term? If so, great work. This brings us to the end of our lesson. Today, we learned about the scientific method. We discussed the steps in the scientific method and looked at the work of biologist Francesco Redi, who conducted the first scientific experiment. Until next time, thank you, teacher. Thank you, students.